Hey, Katie, are you gonna hit record when we start?
Yeah, so we're not recording it because we're actually live on YouTube right now.
Does that mean the YouTube version will be recorded?
Hit record when we start.
Yeah, so we're not recording it because we're actually live on YouTube.
That's just the delay. What about?
Okay, sorry, I had to mute the YouTube stream on my computer.
Will the live stream be recorded?
Yeah, it'll be saved on our page. So,
Oh, so we don't have to worry about recording this. Great. Thanks. All right, at 6:01, we're getting close to capacity, or close not to capacity, but to the numbers of we expected based on our SVPs. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get started in the interest of people's busy schedules. So welcome, all of you. Thanks for joining this second Workers Forum, second in a series of online conversations exploring workers' rights, resources, and roles during the pandemic and beyond. Our goal in these monthly events, this is the second, a third is soon to come, is number one, to share resources that workers can turn to when they need help and to learn about the rights they possess when they need to protect themselves. Two, to connect workers and their advocates who will benefit from learning what each other are up to in the names of advancing workers' interests. And three, to let people of conscience know ways they can get involved in the promotion of improving workers' lives, especially in this triple crisis we're in right now, a public health crisis, an economic crisis, and a racial reckoning, all happening simultaneously. My name is Dan Graff, for those who don't know me. I'm director of the Higgins Labor Program at the Center for Social Concerns here at the University of Notre Dame, where I'm in my office tonight, despite the fact that campus courses have gone online over the last 2 weeks. The COVID crisis has hit home here at Notre Dame. But I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I also want to thank my colleagues, Judy Benchar, Katie McCauley, Robert Caruso, and others for their efforts to get this event off the ground and to make it a success. Our next Workers Forum, soon to be announced, will be in September, so stay tuned for that. The topic will be the problems and potential solutions to the childcare crisis we're confronting in our community. So visit the Higgins webpage or the Center for Social Concerns website in order to learn that, or if you're on our dispatch email list, or if you're not, you want to sign up, go to our webpage and you can sign up and you'll find out in an email about that. Tonight, our focus is on legal challenges faced by workers, as well as the efforts of area attorneys and allies who advocate for workers, especially the most vulnerable under the law. We'll hear from a panel of experts. Some of the panel's expertise is legal, some comes from on-the-ground outreach and education, and some comes from direct experience working in sometimes precarious occupations. I'll introduce the panelists individually as they speak. Each will deliver remarks of about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to a question and answer discussion. My colleague, Katie McCauley, who I mentioned earlier, Assistant Director of the Center for Social Concerns, will be keeping an eye on the chat feature during the panelists' presentations. So we encourage you to place any question you have in the chat, all right? Katie will select individuals to raise their short point/question and give the panel a chance to respond. So about 30 minutes of presentations, about 30 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll end with some ways that people can get involved in efforts to assist low-income workers on the job front or in the housing front. Throughout the presentations too, in the chat area, my Higgins Labor Program colleague, Judy Benchar, will post contact information and website links for those who would like to reach our panelists in the future or to visit Indiana Legal Services and other places to see the resources available there. So check periodically in the chat for those resources to pop up. All right, we're going to hear from 5 panelists before we open it up, and we're going to start with my good friend and colleague here at the University of Notre Dame, Judy Fox, clinical professor of law and director of the Economic Justice Clinic here. So Judy, why don't you start us?
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm looking across the faces that I can see and recognize many of you. So it's nice to see you all again. So obviously, many in our community have had struggles even before the COVID crisis, but that's really exacerbated many of them. The Economic Justice Project represents largely low income, but not always low income, folks who couldn't otherwise afford a lawyer in matters relating to their income. Largely we do housing, but we also do debt collection work. So we do eviction defense, we do foreclosure defense, and we do debt collection defense. We are a free legal service for people. And I think Judy has shared a resource sheet that I have that has the way you can apply for our services, both by calling in and online. I wanted to just really highlight a couple of different things today. Recent things that have happened, very recent, in fact. So yesterday, the Indiana Governor Holcomb announced a program that the Indiana Supreme Court is starting up. And I know that Judy has shared the website link to that here. And this is a program for landlords or tenants who might be facing foreclosure and or eviction. And it's a program that you can sign up for, or even if an eviction hasn't been filed. In fact, Chief Justice Rush, in a conversation, a meeting I was with on Tuesday, the day before they announced this, I wanted to stress that the real reason they're doing this program is to try to prevent that eviction filing. So the idea of the program is you can go onto this webpage and request a facilitation with your landlord, or if you're a landlord, you can request a facilitation with your tenant. And then you're going to be paired with a facilitator. And I know that my program is going to be one of the facilitators, but there'll be lots of them across the state, and do a negotiation essentially with your landlord to either be able to negotiate to not be evicted at all, set up a payment plan or something, or if you can't come to a resolution, perhaps come to an agreement as to when you can move out in a smoother manner. What we're really hoping to do is avoid that eviction filing, because once you have that eviction filing on your record, it's very, very hard to become rehoused. So that's one of the real joys of this. You can do it after an eviction has been filed. And that's open to people as well. The only negative to it is, at least as of today, it's not mandatory. So if you request it and your landlord says he won't do it, nobody can make them, and vice versa. So we'll see how successful that is, but we've got high hopes. It's the Chief Justice's intention to keep this program going beyond COVID, though it is COVID money that's initially funding it. But she's very disturbed by the high rate of evictions in our state. We have some of the highest rates in the nation, and she can't change the laws, but she can do this. The other thing I wanted to mention happened just this morning. FHA and FHFA, so that's FHA mortgages and Fannie Mae Freddie Mac mortgages, they announced that the moratorium on evictions, the moratorium on foreclosures and evicted from foreclosed properties was going to be extended till the end of the year. It's something we'd all expected, but it hadn't happened yet. The other thing related to that is, if the House, right now there is a federal moratorium that has expired on evictions, but if the property has an FHA mortgage on it, this will extend that protection to tenants in that house as well. Many of you may have heard President Trump announce that he's extended the moratorium on federally related evictions. That in fact is not true. All his executive order does was say, gee guys, maybe you should do something, but it didn't actually do anything. And the problem there is we have many people out there thinking that the eviction moratorium itself was extended. It has not. There is no eviction moratorium right now in the state of Indiana, except if you are in an FHA owned property or an FHA insured property, which is why these other resources I've mentioned about are really important. Don't wait till eviction's filed to try to get help. There's still some money out there. Judy was going to share again the resource list of places that had, there was a lot of COVID money that flowed into the community through the state and the city and some not-for-profits to help people who are behind on the rent because of COVID. Now, unfortunately, the state website is going to be shutting down this week because they're out of money. I talked to the local folks, many of them today, and many of the resources left are only available if you had a COVID-related reason for non-payment. Some of the charities had some other emergency money, but it's kind of running out. So I would say if you're behind on your rent, go to these resources as soon as possible before that money is gone. They can pay your landlord, they can pay your utility bills, they can even make your mortgage payment. But the money is going fast, so do not wait until there's something filed. I talked really fast. I hope I didn't talk more than 5 minutes, and I know we're going to kick it over to Kristin.
All right, thank you, Judy, for getting us started. Now I want to turn, the next three panelists all work for Indiana Legal Services. So they're going to introduce you to the work that they do. We'll start with Kristin Hoffman, who is Director of the Worker Rights and Protection Project at Indiana Legal Services. Thank you, Kristin, for joining us.
Dan, thank you so much for organizing this and inviting us on. And thank you all for participating in this, including the panelists. Indiana Legal Services is Indiana's statewide legal aid project. We are funded in part by the Legal Services Corporation, which is a branch that takes money from Congress and sends it out to legal aid programs across the country. Our mission is to use the law to fight poverty, empower clients, and improve access to justice. We talk a lot about access to justice and making sure low-income folks can access the court system. Our geographic scope is the entire state of Indiana, and we have 8 branch offices, including one in South Bend. We provide, much like the Economic Justice Clinic, we provide civil legal assistance to low-income folks. That includes family law, consumer law, elder law, and a lot of services for victims of crime, bankruptcy filings, and currently we're doing a lot of unemployment cases and worker rights cases. The basic eligibility criteria for clients that we serve, they have to be below 200% of the poverty level. If they earn more than that, they are rejected from our services. But they have to have or be below 125% of the federal poverty guidelines unless they have certain payments that they have to make, and rent could be one of those payments. We take cases that the private bar will not accept. So we don't do tort cases. We are prohibited from filing class actions, but we can do group cases and represent other nonprofits that advocate for groups of low-income individuals. We also have some exclusion on who we can represent in terms of immigrants and their status, but we can represent all victims of crime and human trafficking, and those are a lot of the folks that we represent at the Worker Rights and Protection Project. We call the Worker Rights and Protection Project WRAP, and it essentially does 2 very important things. Number one, we do outreach to workers so they know their rights. And we do outreach specifically and target vulnerable workers who face barriers to accessing justice, either due to language access or the types of jobs that they are performing or where they are living in the state, or the fact that they're migratory or immigrant workers. Lopez will talk more about what outreach looks like. And currently we are doing outreach to essential workers around the state regarding COVID-19 protections that were put into place after the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and subsequently the CARES Act. These include the rights to emergency paid sick leave and expanded FMLA for individuals who work for employers with fewer than 500 employees. We are also doing outreach on the expansion of unemployment to include pandemic unemployment assistance and eligibility to independent contractors and gig workers who are eligible for this type of work. And then along with some of the COVID-19 protections from the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, there are anti-retaliation protections that we want workers to know about. So when they inquire about receiving paid sick leave, or they report an unsafe work environment to OSHA, there are protections in place where if they're fired, they can seek loss of wages, and they can file a claim either with the Department of Labor or seek services from a program like RAP or the private bar. We are also doing outreach to workers on housing rights, either with folks who are living in labor camps or those who are facing potential eviction for loss of income. The other component that is important or essential to the work of RAP is actual legal representation. So we do outreach to make sure workers know their rights. And then on top of that, if they do come forward and need to access the courts or have been victimized by wage theft or unsafe work practices, we will handle their case, negotiate with their employer, sometimes take their case to court, help them with the delay in unemployment benefits. And we do a lot of work with victims of human trafficking and immigrants seeking visas based on their victimization in the United States. We do try to seek, or we do try to provide holistic services to clients. So that means Indiana Legal Services is not just siphoned off into different legal practices. Sometimes it may appear that way, but under these conditions where workers are facing a whole front of issues, if they've lost income, our project works closely with Brandon Beeler's housing project. So if someone is seeking unemployment benefits and they've been delayed and therefore they can't make their rent payment, we are working closely to identify urgent matters that we can reach out to the Department of Workforce Development and speed things up so someone isn't kicked out of their home just because there's been a delay in benefits. We collaborate with our benefits team at Indiana Legal Services, who helps people apply for SNAP benefits and maybe disability or other types of financial assistance. And we make sure that folks are able to access those payments. And we also collaborate with other social service agencies to provide financial assistance to people while they are seeking legal services. And we work and collaborate with other legal service providers on systemic issues facing low-income people around the state, and particularly low-income workers. And so I'll turn it over to the next panelist. I think, is it Leo or Brandon?
It will be Leo next. Thanks, Kristin, very much. Our next panelist is Leo Lopez, Kristin's colleague at Indiana Legal Services. Leo's the outreach coordinator for the Worker Rights and Protection Project. Leo, take it away.
Hi, I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Good.
Yeah, so like they said, I'm my full name is Leonel Lopez, but yeah, I go by Leo. Yeah, I'm the outreach coordinator for Indiana Legal Services, and what that means is basically I am in charge of reaching out to workers reaching out to workers and giving them their rights, or telling them about their rights and what they have a right to and not to, or well, not really not to, but we usually do that like pre-COVID years. We usually do that by going to labor camps and talking to them in person. Usually this would take place like after hours, after they're done with their workday, or on weekends when they're not working, like on Sundays or such. So we try to cater to them. We try to go wherever they feel comfortable, wherever they might not. Sometimes these workers don't want to be seen by other workers or by supervising people like staff, like managers or such. And we talk to them. That's where they might want to talk to us about what has happened or anything has happened. But unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we've had to go during work hours when a worker might not be around so that we don't infect them or they don't infect us either way if there is an infection. We usually have been leaving our business cards and postcards. Our postcards say, do you know about your rights? Do you have questions about your rights? And then our business cards just has our info. We put them in the doors usually. It's like we stick them in and then hopefully they see them. We usually have been hanging, now we've been hanging posters around like Mexican stores or Hispanic stores or like Hispanic churches, usually places where they might gather. We have been going out to Mexican restaurants or Hispanic restaurants, at least around the Indy area. We have been just doing a lot of stuff that we usually wouldn't do. We've been doing radio ads in Hispanic radio stations. I think in Indianapolis, it's Radio Latina, and then there's two other ones, La Pantera and Éxitos. We have had to change our like view on this or our approach to this a lot throughout this year, unfortunately. But yeah, we try to reach out to the workers about their rights, about what their needs are. It just has been insane because I don't like some of the barriers that these people face are like language access barriers. They might not have like some legal resources might not have the Spanish language that they might speak, or they might not have, which not always is it Spanish. Sometimes it's Creole, sometimes it's French, sometimes it's Haitian, sometimes it's just different languages that they might not have access to. Sometimes they don't speak out or seek legal services because of fear of retaliation, and that might be them being reported to immigration services. That might be them not being able to come back next year or years after that for more work. It might be, which that's called like getting blacklisted in Mexico. They are fear of just getting fired if they're not here on an H-2A visa, if they're here like undocumented or something, they're afraid of getting fired. Finding a job without documentation can be really hard in this country. Some of the, sorry, I think I have a question.
Nope, the questions are for later. You keep going.
Okay, never mind. Sorry. It says some of the problems that these workers, the farm workers, have been noticing, or that I have noticed by talking to them, is illegal recruitment fees, which that means that when they apply for an H-2A visa, one like charges them in Mexico or in the country that they're applying for it, and that's not supposed to be the way. Like, yes, they pay, but then they get reimbursed. These people are not getting reimbursed. They're seeing discrimination. They're seeing not like they're not wanting to, if they're sick, they're either not wanting to come forward saying I'm sick, or they're not wanting to come forward and saying, can I get paid sick leave for the time I'm not going to be working, just because of fear of retaliation. Is also they'll get fired. We've heard of like cases in different states where like worker or employers have just told them like, if you're sick, leave, like, don't come back, kind of stuff. Some of the COVID-19 related issues that I've been seeing is also, or that can actually be seen, is there's no social distancing in labor camps. Labor camps, they like per room, they usually put like 5 to 8 people in a room, and they just kind of have to live together for the next 6 to however many months they're here for. Another one would be transportation. They're usually, when they come here, they usually don't have any like cars to get around. They have like one, usually like a bus that they all ride in to work and back to the labor camp. And so if someone ends up being sick and they need to go to the hospital, it would take like getting the boss man and asking him to take you to the hospital. And a lot of times they might say like, no, you don't I'm not going to take you to the hospital or something like that, which we have seen happen. Yeah, and it's just lack of medicine, lack of access to health clinics and stuff like that. It's just insane. But yeah, yeah, I think Juan is next, right?
No, next is Brandon, and then we'll go to Juan. We'll give you a little break, Leo, before we ask you to translate. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
We'll turn to Brandon Beeler now, who's also a member of the Indiana Legal Services team. He's director of the Housing Law Center. So Brandon, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for having me, and thanks for this panel and for everyone participating tonight. As I said, I'm Brandon. I'm the Housing Law Center Director at Indiana Legal Services. So I have a statewide role in the fact that's focused on rental housing, and obviously that's mostly eviction issues, to try to notice different trends that are happening throughout the state and to try to act on them in some way. Obviously, and the greatest act would be litigation, taking litigation against things. So really on my initial comments, I think a lot of, I'll echo a lot of what Judy had said. Indiana certainly had an eviction crisis prior to COVID, and this the COVID pandemic is certainly going to probably exacerbate that, especially now that the courts in our state are open for eviction filings and eviction proceedings. I think I come from a perspective that information is key. Information is the most important and powerful thing a tenant or even a landlord can have on their side. I just kind of echo back, and I started reminding folks of this, that back in January, which I know seems like a very, very long time ago, Chief Justice Rush, when she gave her State of the Judiciary address, specifically made comments about eviction court and eviction proceedings in our state, noting that on days she observes eviction hearings, the parity between landlords and tenants, being landlords mostly represented by counsel or at least having legal resources, and tenants who mostly did not have any of that, that created quite a access to justice and equity issue in our, and she highlighted that again. That was before all this happened, and that all still is very relevant. And again, the situation may just shine a magnifying glass on that. A few things to know, just kind of baseline things that I just am going to say that many people may already know on the call, but just wanting to make sure to make it clear. In Indiana, and especially I've seen this a lot this week, especially through our intakes, a landlord cannot evict you or cannot remove you from your property without a court order. They need the court order. The notice to quit or the letter to leave or a verbal statement to leave is not enough. Tenants have a right to due process, which means they have a right to go to court to have a judge evaluate whether losing their home or being evicted is the proper remedy. This has happened a lot this week throughout the state, not just here in the Indianapolis service area, but the number one call I've gotten this week is my landlord says I have to leave. By Friday, do I have to get out? The answer is no, unless there is a court order. The other kind of basic advice I will give out, which is this now comes with a big caveat, so I'll have a few things to say afterward, is in Indiana, tenants need to always pay rent. I know, asterisk, I understand that we don't have access to funds and most tenants don't, and this is, tenants have greatly suffered during this time, but under the law, even if the landlord has not met their obligations, and I know it does not make sense, but a tenant still can be evicted if they are not current with their rent obligations. So again, kind of getting into that and getting to some of the protections that, again, this is very much scratching the surface in 5 minutes. I just wanted to answer, just again, those are like our two most common questions we get. I'm going to give you some dates. And again, these are going to be available on a website that I think we're going to share. Just because, I think a lot of you have heard about the eviction moratoria or moratorium. There's a few of them. So I just want to give the dates so you know what they are. In Indiana, March 19th through August 14th, Governor Holcomb said that landlords could not initiate an eviction proceeding. What does that mean? That's a whole other topic, but no initiating an eviction action between March 19th and August 14th. March 27th is when the CARES Act went into place, and that extended through July 25th. Now, the Indiana moratorium applies to all rental agreements, private, public, or subsidized or any other. The CARES Act only applies to basically federally subsidized properties. So no eviction for non-payment between those dates, but between March 27th and July 25th. It's due for non-payment, but there also is an additional notice requirement that the landlords must oblige by, meaning that beginning on March 25th, which I actually will argue is really should be in Indiana August 15th, the landlord needs to give the tenant a 30-day notice that they intend to evict. Finally, as Judy said, the FHA insured mortgages, that moratorium extends through August 31st. So we're still in that period. That's sort of the interplay. And I know I won't get too legal on you. And if this comes up in the question answer session, I can kind of get into it a bit more. But, again, Indiana and what Governor Holcomb said in his press conferences every time he re-upped or even began the Indiana's eviction moratorium was the initiation. So we view initiation as sending that first notice to quit. So that's just sort of kind of looking at those different dates and what might apply to your situation. As far as rental assistance, as Judy said, today IHCDA's portal closed. Unfortunately, that makes me think that they're not going to be getting any more funds, but keep an eye on that because there are a few things that could happen. First and foremost, which I will just kind of also say doesn't have a lot of hope, but back in May, the House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act, which does have a federal program for rental assistance. It is sitting in the Senate. It's unlikely it'll be acted on, but maybe not, but maybe so. But also there may be other stimulus packages. Rental assistance has been a conversation that's been obviously dominating the national dialogue. So keep an eye out if Congress allocates funds for the states for rental assistance. Again, the eviction and moratoria over, it's a little bit too little too late, but maybe it'll come fast. Also look to your local resources. A lot of faith groups have really stepped up. So look and see if your church, your mosque, your synagogue potentially have some sources of rental assistance out there. Finally, I will just say that the Landlord Tenant Task Force put out a list of recommendations for courts to follow in anticipation of a surge of eviction filings. They're not mandated at this point. They've not been issued by a court order, but you may want to look to your local courts to see what procedures are in place there, to see if the courts have adopted any. And also, yes, the settlement conference program is available. It's live now online. As Judy said, I think the most beneficial for a tenant, the most beneficial position to be in is prior to an eviction case being filed, to try to encourage your landlord and maybe have a third party attorney be there to try to help broker a deal, so you may not have to deal with the stigma of an eviction filing. I will say check out those sites on the Indiana Supreme Court's website. There's a list of appendices that go along with the task force report, and one of them that I think is the most important for both landlords and tenants is a sample repayment plan. So it's something you can just pull off if you need help in initiating that conversation with your tenants or with your landlord. It's a good starting point to kind of have a guide. And I think finally, and I'll just kind of sum up with this, and I think Kristin and Leo both hit on this pretty well, but one of my biggest concerns going forward isn't necessarily just related to eviction, but it's an access to justice issue. I mean, I think it's been said a lot that, if it's not safe enough to go to court, to leave your home to go to court, is it really safe enough to evict you during this time? I think that's a question we all may have a similar answer to, but a lot of our clients who are extremely low income and very vulnerable and have a multitude of issues and different vulnerabilities, don't maybe have access to platforms like YouTube, platforms like Zoom, things like that courts may assume that they do. So if you are in a situation or you know of someone who's in a situation where they may have a court hearing and have no idea how they have to attend it, to just get it to the court as soon as possible and try to work it out, because, first of all, an eviction's terrible, and an eviction because you couldn't show up, shouldn't happen. So that's sort of my initial, I wish I had happier things to say, but I do not. But that's kind of my initial comments.
Thank you, Brandon. You put a smiling face though on the news, so and we appreciate your work. Our final panelist is Juan Michoacano, who's an H-2A visa migrant worker. We put Juan last, not because he's least important, but because we weren't convinced he would be off work in time when the panel started. We have Leo here, who's going to translate for us, and Juan's going to tell us a bit about his own experience as a worker in Indiana, and the challenges facing him and some of the people that he works with. He's worked with Indiana Legal Services for some time. So thank you, Juan. And Leo, would you mind translating for us?
Yeah. Dice, señor Juan, dicen hola, que lo estaba introduciendo a usted al grupo. Está diciendo que sí, que pues su historia de quién es, que es un trabajador de visa de H2A, y ahora ya puede usted decir unas cuantas cosas, si quiere, al público sobre sus experiencias con la pandemia y con el trabajo que hace. También, nada más para que sepa, si puede decir como 2 oraciones y después yo traduzco y después usted vuelve a decir algo, ¿ok?
Oh, hola a todos, mucho gusto por estar en este foro con ustedes. Mi nombre es Juan, Michoacano, así me dicen muchos, me conocen por Michoacano. Soy un trabajador de H2A, ya llevo tiempo trabajando en con este tipo de visas.
Okay. He says, hello, everyone. He says, thank you for having me. He says that he is happy to be here, that he is an H-2A visa. His name is Juan Michoacano. He says a lot of his friends know him as Michoacano.
And can Juan just give us, just a little bit about his own experiences working under the visa program, maybe some of the challenges he's faced either before or during COVID. I'm sure we have lots to hear from him, but maybe in the next couple of minutes, especially with the translation, and then maybe people can ask him some follow-up questions too.
Dice que si puede compartir un poco de su experiencia con la pandemia y con el trabajo de H2A, que mucha de esta gente no sabe eso. Y pues dice que en estos como unos 2 minutos, porque como tenemos que traducir, pues va a tardar un poquito más, pero si puede decir algo.
Pues mi experiencia con el programa de las visas H2A, pues para mí ha sido de suma importancia. ¿Por qué? Porque venimos legalmente a trabajar por un periodo de marzo a diciembre. A veces son tiempos más cortos, pero es un promedio, ¿no? De marzo a diciembre. Son los periodos en que venimos a trabajar con este tipo de programas.
Okay. He says that his experience with H-2A visas is, he says that they're amazing, that he says that he's grateful for the program. He believes that that it is a legal way to come to work here and then go back home instead of having to stay in a country where you don't know much about. He says that usually he comes from March to December. He says that it's a median between March and December, usually around those months. Ya puedes seguir eso.
Pues una de las experiencias que hemos tenido ahorita con lo de la pandemia, pues yo creo que a todos nos ha perjudicado en todos los aspectos, en el trabajo, en la vida del diario. Pues tenemos que tener más precauciones. La afectación, pues yo creo que como nosotros venimos a trabajar, a reparar granjas, que son granjas de cerdos, de pollos o establos para las vacas, pues los proyectos grandes en ese aspecto, pues no ha habido proyectos grandes, ¿verdad? Entonces, pues ahorita lo que andamos haciendo son bodegas para los rancheros, garajes para los rancheros, ¿no? Cosas pequeñas, pero nos mantiene ocupado el patrón.
Okay. He says that his experiences with COVID-19 and the H-2A program is, he says that it's affected everyone in many different ways in the way we live life, the way we work. He believes that the way they've been affected is that usually they would build livestock buildings for pigs, chickens, cows. But he says that right now, unfortunately, with all this happening and mostly around food processing places or like livestock places, he says that they've had to go from building those bigger buildings to building garages or barns or things like that for farmers instead of what they would actually usually do.
Because, and is it been an issue of employment, or is there a guarantee if he comes in on a visa that he's going to be matched with an employer? You know, we have such a high unemployment rate here. Plus, I'm wondering if he's concerned about safety and whether employers are making arrangements for the health and safety workers right now.
Dice que sí, ahorita que sí, el problema de esto de que no tienen los edificios grandes para construir, que si eso es porque no hay trabajadores o no está o sea, no quieren construir eso por la pandemia o que si, cómo está eso, y también que si los empleadores están dándole a usted la seguridad que debe en el trabajo, así como estar seguro en el trabajo sin infectarse.
Pues en cuestión de la seguridad para no infectarnos, pues como somos el grupito de compañeros, pues siempre nos recuerda el patrón, ¿no? Que cuando vayamos a comprar, por ejemplo, comida, es muy importante la máscara, el gel para las manos. Cuando regresamos de comprar, por ejemplo, comida los fines de semana, pues la desinfectada de las verduras, lavarnos las manos o a veces hasta bañarnos llegando de comprar, ¿no? Y pues...
Déjeme traduzco eso para que no se me olvide. He says that as workplace safety goes, he says that his boss always is, since they're a smaller crew, he says that his boss is always reminding him about the 6 feet social distancing, wearing masks, hand sanitizer. He says that the boss is always also reminding them outside of work that if they do go to like a restaurant, to be careful. If they go, he says that usually on weekends they go and buy groceries and then bring them back. He says that the boss even says that even after buying groceries, maybe changing your clothes, or maybe even he says taking a shower, washing the veggies, washing, like throwing away the bags, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, you know what? I could continue with my own questions of Juan, but why don't we just use that as a starter? There's several questions people have asked in the chat. This will give us a good 20 minutes or more of conversation. And if people have more questions for Juan, if you could thank him, Leo, especially because of the, you know, after a long day and the challenges of having to sit and listen to people speak in English for a long period before he got to engage. If he could stay on a little longer, I'd appreciate it.
Dice que de ahora en adelante pues vamos a hacer, que van a hacernos a todos los que hemos hablado preguntas y nosotros vamos a responder. Que si, dice que agradece mucho estar aquí porque él entiende que usted ha trabajado todo el día y dice que para estar en el teléfono oyendo a mucha gente hablar inglés, que puede ser difícil. Dice que muchas gracias.
No se preocupe, estamos para servirles, pues, para participar y no se preocupen de que se haya trabajado, estamos relajados ahorita ya.
He says not to worry about him having a long day of work. He says he's relaxing now. He says he's always here to participate and to spread awareness.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you all to our panelists for sharing with us the resources and the challenges that you all are facing, as well as the people you work with and for. I'm going to ask Katie McCauley. I know there's several questions people have, and she'll call on someone to pose a question or a brief comment. Could be applied to one member of the panel or more, but any of you should feel free to respond if you have something to say.
Thanks, Dan. So our first question is from Dana Moss. So Dana, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, Ola. I'm an assistant professor here at Notre Dame in sociology. And my question is for anyone on the panel. I think I was especially Leo, but for anyone, what do you do if you encounter an undocumented worker that's facing some kind of problem, abuse, or crisis? And do you have the capacity to help them? And if so, how can they be helped?
Oh, okay, I'll go. Yes, we do have the capacity to help them. Like Kristin said in her speech, she said that we help anyone who is a victim of a crime or humanitarian aid. So it would depend on what they've gone through and what they qualify for. But Kristin could speak more to it.
Well, and I'd just like to say that our program can represent anyone, whether they're undocumented or not, on anything that we do. So my clinic does largely housing, but we have other clinics that do some other things. We do a little bit of worker things. In other words, I've done fair labor claims if I work closely with legal services. So basically, if I come across something and they can't do it, then maybe I will do it. But typically those kinds of things outside of housing and debt are because I'm already representing a client. There are an awful lot of undocumented immigrants who get abused in the housing market.
Thanks. And Judy's referring to the Notre Dame Economic Justice Clinic. So again, you can consult that at the Notre Dame website. Thanks. Go ahead, Kristin.
So we definitely come into contact with a lot of undocumented workers. It's really hard to be specific about where the data comes from, but the majority of census reports or migration policy reports will say that upwards of 50% of the agriculture workers in the United States are undocumented. And what's helpful with the skills and experience of the people in RAP, including Leo and myself, is that we have a background in immigration. And if we're dealing with some of the same systems of oppression and exploitation, we usually apply an analysis of forced labor or obstruction of justice or assault. There are a number of different types of crimes that continuously pop up in the labor systems that we do outreach in. So on the rare occasion that we meet with an undocumented worker who hasn't been victimized in the past, we will then refer them to a legal service agency that represents folks regardless of their immigration status and make sure that they have access to legal services, even if it's not from our organization. The other thing that's really important is the approach to providing services to someone who has either undergone trauma or is in a situation where their status makes them very vulnerable, is that you really have to come in with a survivor-centered approach and make sure that they have their emergency needs addressed really first, and that is housing. And if someone's in a labor camp and they're being abused physically or being exploited or trafficked, we need to make sure that we can find some emergency housing for them right away. And then we do a lot of advocacy if they need to report anyone to law enforcement to have the crime that they've been victim to investigated. So we really pull in a lot of different players to help folks, and a lot of that applies to undocumented workers. And we will take their case and assist them with their immigration. At the same time, we're helping them try and recoup back wages or demand restitution for something like forced labor or a Fair Labor Standards Act violation.
Thanks very much. Katie, another question?
Sure. So our next question is from Thomas Kesselman.
Kesselman.
Kesselman, thank you.
Muted, Tom, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask, I guess, Brandon and Judy, but anybody else who might have information about whether or not either the city council or the county council has any legal authority to pass resolutions or legislation that would help stop evictions.
The answer to that is today they do. And the reason I say that is Indianapolis passed just such a resolution and the state legislature passed a law invalidating it. Luckily, the governor vetoed it. There's a question as to whether they're going to bring that back or not. I'm going to let Brandon talk about Indianapolis, but just to talk about South Bend for a minute, our city council has really stepped up on this, and they are looking at passing a renter protection ordinance. Again, we're not sure what's going to happen to that if the downstate does something about it. But they also provided quite a bit of funding to two local charities, St. Vincent de Paul and Real Services, to provide financial assistance to folks who are behind on their rent. And that's the money that is still available, even though the state money has dried up. The city, if your house is in South Bend, they do still have some of that money available. The county probably doesn't, well, the county hasn't shown the same kind of interest, and I'm not sure how a countywide ordinance would operate, though I suppose they'd have the same issues as the city.
And we do have a county council member on the call. I don't know if Diana Hess would be willing to say a few words from her point of view on this. Is Rachel Tomas Morgan of the Common Council on the call? I'm going to ask Judy Benchar to share what Common Councilor Rachel Tomas Morgan, who's a colleague of ours at the Center for Social Concerns and on the City Council, she shared with us a couple of resources that reference what Judy is talking about at the city level. So look in the chat for those resources. But Diana Hess, can I put you on the spot? Would you be willing to say what, if any, role the county council has or the county government in this issue?
Well, we haven't been approached by anyone. And we have we've had no conversation about it right now. But knowing that we possibly could have an impact, that is something I think we should take a look at. I don't know how many, I don't know, Judy, if you can tell me how many evictions take place in the county proper, outside of.
The county proper has some of the highest evictions in the country.
Okay.
And what I will say is that the county got quite a bit of CARES money as well. And I apologize that I didn't approach you, but I have raised this with several other council members, because that's to see if there's any way that some of that money could be shared or used. So it is an issue that's out there. And I think Brendan can talk about Indianapolis, since it's done quite a bit.
Are there any other,
by the way, Fort Wayne is also doing things. Yeah.
okay. Judy, are there any other counties that are doing it?
Not that I know of. And Brendan, do you know of any of the counties?
Evansville, I've consulted with some city councilors in Evansville. So Evansville is looking to put some protections into place through their city county council.
And Fort Wayne is doing something as well, but it's citywide. Yeah, but go ahead, Brendan. Tell us about Indianapolis, because that's really
great. Connections are being made.
Yeah.
Representative county government responding, reacting, and maybe we can pull something out of that. Thanks, Brandon. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So as Judy said, in Indianapolis at the end of February, I think the February 27th council meeting, the city of Indianapolis, the city county council passed a few ordinances. One is that tenants have a right, have a tenant bill, or I guess a tenant's bill of rights is something that's now required, that all landlords, big and small, have to provide their tenants, which explain you have a right to, a habitable unit, you have the right to seek legal assistance, you have the right to call the health department, a list of just rights that we kind of tried to hone in on. The bigger one, I guess the bigger teeth one that the city passed was an anti-retaliation statute, which we didn't, or not statute, ordinance that we did not have. So the city now, if it's a rebuttable presumption that if a landlord takes adverse action, meaning files an eviction or initiates an eviction after the tenant engages some sort of protected activity. Basically, the easiest example is the tenant calls the health department. It is a rebuttable presumption that within 60 days, if the landlord moves for eviction, that is retaliatory, and now it's the landlord's burden to prove that it was in fact was not retaliatory, and there was actually a pretextual reason, or there was no pretextual reason for the action. So those are two great protections that came through, and as Judy mentioned, the drama that came from that was the apartment association did not care to engage with the city county council and went straight down Market Street to the State House to file their own bill to cut it out. Again, fortunately, that did not, the governor did not sign that. But most recently, I would say what the Indianapolis, or what the Marion County City Council council did. They are the ones in charge of distributing distributing the budget for rental assistance. They kept and continued. They used CARES Act funds that they received, but they've also used some of their own budget to kind of try to refill the bucket because we have the rental assistance here program here in Marion County. And most significantly, and this is informal, this is not like a resolution, but leadership on the council have brought the courts together here because we have a lot of eviction courts to try to informally persuade them through kind of the muscle of the administration to adopt some of the procedures that the landlord tenant task force recommended. That's kind of behind the scenes conversation, but that is helpful because again, those procedures were meant to strike a balance, right? It was meant to be fair to landlords and to allow landlords to engage in their rights to, rent properties for profit, but also it slows down the process so tenants can have the right to, the opportunity to find resources. So right now behind the scenes, those are some really important things in the middle of this crisis that they're doing here in Indianapolis.
Thank you, Brandon. Sometimes in South Bend, we feel cut off from state government. There's not even an interstate that gets us there.
Hey, I'm from Evansville. I understand. So.
Okay, Katie.
Sure. So I'm going to go with a question from Renee Rosenbaum next, since it's kind of on the same topic. And this question is for Juan. So Renee, if you can go ahead and ask it if you want.
Oh, you got to unmute. There you go.
My interest is in knowing what one thinks about what the priorities are in terms of legal action at the local level.
Leo, would you mind translating for us?
Yeah, and this is about housing, right?
Correct.
So I'm gonna have to translate a little bit just so that he knows what's happening. Juan, nada más para que sepa que todo lo que han dicho es sobre leyes de viviendas, porque ahorita como no ha habido dinero para pagar renta, así que muchos dueños de casas quieren sacar a los que están rentando, a los que están viviendo ahí. Y lo que le quieren preguntar a ustedes que ¿qué piensa usted sobre acción local, o sea, de aquí mismo, de los mismos condados, para ayudar a estas personas que ocupan ayuda, pues así, con su vivienda?
Pues es que es diferente la situación de nosotros porque, bueno, nosotros el patrón que nos trae contratados, pues nos proporciona vivienda, ¿no? Él nos paga la vivienda, ¿no? Entonces, sí he escuchado por ahí en las noticias que pues mucha gente les están ayudando con la renta y pues que como que sí ya se llegó un tiempo donde ya ahora les quieren cobrar renta, ¿no? Pero es a las personas común, ¿no? Como que están aquí, ¿no? El caso de nosotros pues es diferente, como les repito, ¿no? Porque a nosotros nos proporcionan vivienda, el patrón paga la renta al dueño de la casa o apartamento quien le renta, ¿no?
Mm-hmm. He says that, so in his case, he says that it's a little different because with H-2A visas, they have to provide, whoever contracts them, he says his employer has to provide housing for him or in their crew. They have to, it's part of the contract. He says that he doesn't see like the issue that people see. He has seen in the news, he says that a lot of people with this issue and then receiving some type of assistance and some not receiving any. He believes that, yeah. Sorry.
Could I just add something to that? That the CARES money isn't available for undocumented immigrants, but if you're documented, yes, but there are agencies that we are all in touch with that do have funds for undocumented immigrants for housing. If anybody's listening and needs help, just reach out to one of us.
I think Katie had a follow-up for Juan too. Is that right, Katie?
Yeah. So we have a follow-up question from Kristin Hoffman for Juan.
The panelists get some questions. All right. Oh, Leo.
I think I have him right here, right? Katie, are these ones?
I sent it to Juan or to Leo so he could prep the translation.
I had like 20 questions for him.
Juan dice que si usted ha sabido de otros trabajadores con H2A, de otros empleadores que no han tenido una buena experiencia con la visa en los Estados Unidos.
Pues que yo sepa, no, porque bueno, los que hemos venido a trabajar, ya sea con, bueno, a veces, ahorita con la situación de la pandemia, pues hay personas que vienen con otras empresas, pues que no trabajan como antes, ¿no? Ahorita pues un promedio de 8, 10 horas diarias, ¿no? Los años anteriores, pues a veces trabaja uno hasta 12 horas, ¿verdad? Pero a veces mucha gente quisiéramos 10, 12 horas, ¿no? Pero por la situación de la pandemia ahorita, pues creo que ha bajado un poco las horas de trabajo, ¿no? A veces la gente se queja porque pues ven la diferencia, ¿no? El año pasado trabajábamos mucho, este año trabajamos menos, pero en lo que cabe, pues creo que nos mantienen trabajando lo que dice el contrato, ¿no? Arriba de las 40 horas por semana. Y pues
So I asked the
personas que...
question.
está bien, okay.
I asked a question, has Juan known other H-2A workers for other employers who have not had a good experience in the US on the visa? And he says that he has not, or that he has not known of the other ones that he does know, he has not known anyone with a bad experience. He says that everyone is, like right now with at least with his contractor, that everyone is happy, mostly because they have worked during the pandemic, wherein he says that in Mexico almost everything has shut down. He says that the employer is keeping him up like over 40 hours a week, which is more than the promise. So he says that unfortunately, they would want more than that, like past years, where in past years they have had 12 to 14 hours per day, but now he says that that everyone is pretty happy with because of the hours and the opportunity for work in this troubling time.
And it's nice to hear positive stories in this troubling time. So thank you, Juan. Gracias, Juan and Leo. Katie, we have another question?
Sure.
I have like 5 more.
Okay. How about one more, Leo, and then we'll go on, and then we'll go back to the general.
Okay, let's see. Well, last one with COVID-19. Juan, ¿usted ha tenido miedo de cualquier persona en su grupo que tuviera COVID-19?
Pues a veces lo platicamos entre todos y sí nos preocupa porque, bueno, si si alguien se llegara a infectar, pues todo el grupo tendríamos que estar ¿cómo se llama? En cuarentena, aislados 2 semanas. Es lo que nos ha dicho el patrón, ¿no? Por eso tratamos de tomar las precauciones, de seguir lo que nos dicen, pues para evitar eso, ¿no? Ya sería, pues, una mala suerte, como a veces llamamos, ¿no? Si alguien se contagiara, pues contagia a los demás, ¿no? Pero pues sí es miedo. Yo creo que todos lo tenemos, ¿no? De contagiarnos, ¿no?
Sí. I asked the question, was he ever fearful of anyone in the crew having COVID-19? And he says that maybe fearful is a strong word, but he says that they're definitely worried and definitely afraid of like going back home and giving it to someone else. But he says that mostly between them, they've talked about it, and they've said about how if one got it, then almost every single one of the workers would get it just because of like the close contact that they have. He says that is something, I mean, that would be 2 weeks where they have to quarantine. And if they made it out alive, of course, he says that like they would he says that it would be an inconvenience because everyone would have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and they want to work.
All right, thanks again, Juan and Leo. Katie, back to you. Maybe we have time for 2 more questions, and then I'll ask, we'll talk about next steps and ways that people can get involved. And then if people want to stick around after this formal part, and if any of the panelists can stick around for a little while, we're happy to continue to host, but we want to be sensitive to people's times.
Yeah, so our next question is from Robert Caruso.
Hi, so I had a question for Leo mostly, but I guess anyone on the panel probably could have answered it. I was just curious regarding like outreach. Do you think that workers could, or like do, but not officially are supposed to, face retaliation if they're caught talking with you guys?
I definitely think that is, if that would, I mean, if they know that we are a legal rights or worker rights organization or legal help organization, legal aid, then yes, a lot of employers can take retaliation measures to workers. At least when I used to work in the farm, that's how it used to. I mean, people would tell you that no, like that's not your right, things like that. Try to give put fear into you, I guess, so that you wouldn't talk. And then, I mean, yeah, they do.
Can I just add to, so this comes up, it's most overt when you're doing outreach to labor camps, and it doesn't have to be an agricultural labor camp, but it could be where people are living closely and all working together, where the fear that workers have of just talking to legal aid is going to impact them, and it definitely does. But I will say this, there's a law called the Agriculture Worker Protection Act that legal aid programs across the country are really the only folks that handle claims under this act, because there is no fee generating portion. If you can take 10 claims to court for your clients and you can get damages, but no one pays for the legal fees. So legal aid handles these cases. And in that law, there is written a protection that says workers have the right to talk to legal aid or anyone about their legal rights, and they cannot be retaliated against. So there are ways that we can pursue lost wages if this happens, and it's difficult to prove retaliation claims, but there is at least some part of the law that applies to this, recognizing that workers are going to be told not to talk to people about their rights.
Thank you, Kristin. Katie, is there one more short question? I now see that we have a couple people I want to call on to talk about stuff that's being done in the area. Do you have another question, or should I go straight to that?
We've got one more question from
Let's go on.
so maybe we'll swing here.
Is that me, Katie? So I actually had a question for Kristin or Leo that has come into our office a lot, and we haven't been able to help. We have gotten quite a few calls from workers. I won't divulge that they're largely from RV and meat processing plants in our area, of workers who are quite afraid that there are not proper COVID protections in place and don't know what to do. And I have suggested to a couple of them, have they tried to reach OSHA, and they just laughed and said OSHA doesn't care. Is there anything that workers can do if they feel they're in an unsafe work environment?
So I'll start. And there's a few things that they can do and should do. And the likelihood of everyone following this is especially if they aren't comfortable with their immigration status, or they don't feel like they have rights. But to speak up and say something and ask about safety to a supervisor is one of the first things that's going to happen to elevate some kind of OSHA or safety related workplace claim. And so that would be the first point. And then we are seeing we are seeing some states and some cases that are charging the way on this. You know, ILS can't lobby, but individuals out there can certainly talk to their representatives and talk about getting some real worker protection standards put in place and have that apply. And we have states out there like Virginia and Washington, and even in Michigan had an executive order that was issued about particular workplace safety and COVID testing for farm workers. But there's work you can do at the legislative level. There's also I haven't followed the most recent status of this case, but a whole bunch of McDonald's employees brought a worker safety claim in the Chicago area, and I think it survived a motion to dismiss, but it wasn't seeking money. It was seeking injunctive relief to force the business owners to provide more personal protective equipment to workers because they were interfacing with the public, and it was brought as a public safety lawsuit. So there are ways to explore litigation as well. And then certainly we haven't even talked about the tsunami, not only of eviction cases, but of unemployment claims. And tsunami is not correct. It's been a steady wave, just lap after lap, just so many folks out there who have particular medical issues that really their doctors are telling them they can't or they should not interface with people or work closely. They need to socially isolate because they either have compromised immune systems or health-related concerns where if they come down with COVID, they're in dire straits. And we have seen people in a variety of circumstances being forced to quit their job because they can't have that exposure. Or someone at home has that exposure. I don't advise anyone to do this without talking to a lawyer first, but BWD has allowed benefits to move forward for some folks who are unemployed because their employer is not following appropriate safety standards. So those are some of the avenues that I would pursue. I don't know if Leo has anything else to add on that note.
I guess not. Okay, that's good. You know, I want to talk a little bit because I know we're getting close to end time and people are going to have to leave. Turn to a couple people in the area that can tell us what's happening locally. Genevieve Redston, are you on the call?
I am, yeah, and I think Miller is, who also works with me on South Bend Tenant Association.
Great. Let me ask people to maybe to mute. There's some feedback going on if you're not speaking. So Genevieve Redston and Greg Miller are both Notre Dame undergraduates, and they're going to tell us a little bit about the work that they're doing locally. Thank you, Genevieve.
Yeah, of course. Greg, do you want to start and I can follow?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it's Genevieve's sort of brainchild a couple years back. She was interested in housing policy, and so I sort of tagged along with her. But we helped with some community leaders. I've been helping them with the South Bend Tenant Association, which is a new nonprofit that helps to serve the tenants in the area, provide them resources and provide them power, as well as you know, they need education and need to know what their rights are. And so that's sort of the hole we're trying to fill, and we're really trying to represent the South Bend tenants in that capacity.
And is there a website for that, Greg or Genevieve?
Yeah, we're both on Facebook, which you'll be able to find us easily at South Bend Tenant Association, and then there's a website, sbtenantassociation.com, that you can access anytime.
And maybe Greg, you could put that in the chat real quick while we turn to Genevieve because I interrupted her accidentally.
Yeah, definitely. So right now we're looking to expand our capacity to organize. And so since we are sort of in the early phases of developing our organization, we're just looking for anyone, but especially undergraduates who feel that they can bring something to the table, whether that's, website design or any kind of communications strengths and skills, and any kind of organizing experience that you might have. If you are interested in working with us, we have plenty for you to do.
Thank you so much, both of you. I also now, I think Rachel Tomas Morgan, the city councilor and colleague of mine here at the center I referenced earlier, is now on the call. Rachel, are you able to say a little bit really quickly about, I mentioned earlier a little bit about what you're working on, but what the city government is doing?
Sure. Actually, this is Judy Fox could very easily speak to this too. I've had the pleasure of working with Judy and Angie Hoven in Indiana Legal Services to bring city government and partners across the city together to be able to offer resources to our South Bend residents facing eviction in the wake of COVID. And so we have gathered resources, legal resources and financial resources for rental and utilities, and made that available on the South Bend, on the City of South Bend website. So you can
I just posted that in the chat, so that's now posted right now.
Great, thanks, Dan. But there are resources available for rental assistance and utility assistance, as well as free legal assistance through Notre Dame Legal Clinic and Indiana Legal Services. And so for anyone you know who could benefit from these services, please share widely.
Thanks very much, Rachel. So I just real quick to any of the panelists, one sentence on next step that you would encourage the listening, watching audience here, what to follow, ways to get involved, things to look for, just to eat a round robin, really short. I'll start and I'll call on people to make it quicker. Brandon, you're on my screen first. What would you say?
Oh boy. Rental assistance, rental assistance, rental assistance.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon. Kristin. Look, you're muted. There you go.
So wait, I was reading the group chat when you said, I'm sorry, what did you?
I just said, like,
do?
maybe in a closing comment for the 60 or so people here, just a sentence or so, like, what would you think is the next step if somebody wants to get involved, or something they need to be watching for in the news? Just anything sort of looking forward, really.
Oh, come volunteer for RAP. We take interns. We need people to help us spread Know Your Rights education. That could be putting up posters in your favorite store. That could be helping us review unemployment claims. It could be doing a lot. But we definitely have spots for internships, and follow us on social media.
Okay, thanks, Kristin. Leo, and maybe Leo, you can ask Juan's closing thought too, maybe on next steps.
Yeah, I'll ask Juan too. Juan, que si quieren saber que en una oración, ¿usted qué cree que son los siguientes pasos para seguir y ayudar al programa H2A o a trabajadores como usted? Si está hablando, se me hace que tiene... ahí está. No, otra vez.
¿Ya?
Ya.
Me dice que qué se podría hacer para seguir continuar con el programa de H2A, o
sea, siguientes pasos para mejorar.
Los siguientes pasos para mejorar. Pues yo creo que habría que revisar muchas cosas con las empresas, ¿no? Si todas trabajan de acuerdo a las reglas o a que el gobierno quiere, ¿no? Porque nosotros ahorita en lo personal con la empresa que venimos, pues estamos muy contentos, ¿no? Porque habíamos trabajado con otra empresa. También estuvimos contentos, pero como que todas las empresas trabajan o tienen sus reglas diferentes, ¿no? Ahorita en lo personal con el patrón que vinimos este año, pues nos ha atendido de maravilla, se ha preocupado mucho por nosotros. He escuchado que en otras empresas, en ocasiones, cuando la gente se accidenta o se enferma, pues lo botan ya como, vamos a llamarlo como un desecho, ¿no? Ya no me produces, ya no me sirves, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que habría que revisar, pues, cosas por ahí. Yo creo que si todas las empresas siguen los pasos, que el gobierno quiere para proteger al trabajador, ¿no?
He says that he says that if all companies follow regulations the way they're supposed to, labor reform sort of thing, where just more scrutiny on companies.
You're being underpaid tonight, Leo, for your translation services, I want to say. Thanks. Tell Juan gracias. And then if you have a final thought to share, it'd be great.
Juan dice gracias. And then my final thought would be kind of like, I mean, Juan probably knows it best, but yeah, I'd say labor reform to help workers. I think there's always going to be ignorance, and that's going to be with us and with leadership. But I think if we just push what the workers are asking for, they should be able to get that.
Thank you, Leo. Judy, you have a final thought?
2, vote.
We'll
is
give
my
you 2.
first final thought. My second final thought is to contact your state and federal representatives and let them know that we really do need more COVID help, and we need non-COVID help for workers and tenants, especially across this country, because we are looking at some even darker times, I'm afraid, if we don't.
Thank you, Judy. And thanks to all the panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules. They're working hard all day, and then they joined us this evening. So, I wish they could hear our applause of gratitude, but please know that we appreciate you. You can watch some people silently applaud, but please consult Indiana Legal Services, get involved in these issues. And I'm going to stick around for a little while longer. I want to thank you all for attending. If anybody does want to stick around, unfortunately, I don't have beer or wine to offer any of you, but if anyone wants to stay on and chat for a little while, I'll certainly stick around. Otherwise, please look for us at the next Workers Forum. I just posted the Higgins Labor Program website for links if you want to get involved in our programming. Thanks again, not only to the panelists, but to Katie McCauley, to Judy Benchar, to Robert Caruso, the support of the Center for Social Concerns. I see Director Bill Purcell is on the call and others. So thanks everyone for turning out on a Thursday night. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks, Kevin.